I'm going to start this video off by saying I'm sorry to everyone trying to use Pokemon Showdown today, because after making this guide, the ladder is going to be absolutely flooded with teams like this for a pretty good amount of time, but I just have to cover this team. That when I saw it in Fan Fridays, this is one of the most amazing Pokemon strategies I've ever seen, and it incorporates some of my most favorite ideas, but also taking it to another level, and that's kind of what this video is about as well. Don't copy this exactly. Invent tech for it, or at least come up with other ideas. That Venom Drench, Venoshock, Poison Gas, this has been around for a pretty long time for Pokemon, but it's finally getting like this insane amount of use. Look for those overlooked combos, look for those Z moves that might work into something else, and try to become the new Salazzle team. Try to create something that is the next idea of this team, but even better or even more different, to where people don't expect it, and then you go and win a lot of battles. And I don't know if Keys understand what he has brought upon the world, but now let's go right into it. So the strategy makes a lot of sense. That we have Poison Gas on Salazzle with Corrosion. So it means both opponents are immediately getting poisoned, and that's why I like Poison Gas so much. I did a video about 2 years ago on moves that you should use more, and the reason why I did that video is because Poison Gas is one of my favorite moves, that you just poison both opponents. Now, you can use Venoshock and you can use Venom Drench, but I didn't really think about it that much. I was just, oh, Poison Gas. Now you give your opponent a little bit of a hassle while chipping them away, or at least they take damage while you go for some setup, or do whatever strategy that you want to. But Venom Drench is an absolutely destructive move as well, that if both the opponents are poisoned from Poison Gas, then that means you just have your next Pokemon use Venom Drench, and they lose all of their sweeping potential. Attack, special attack, and speed drop by 1. So -3 in one turn is one of the worst things that could happen to any Pokemon. So because of that, the combo is absolutely insane, and we see this in Fan Fridays. Salazzle leads, uses its speed for that Poison Gas. Muk, it's already a really tanky and durable Pokemon, goes for the Venom Drench, and then the opponent really has no options from there. Like, if they lead with a Tapu Koko, and the Salazzle is not double focused down, and then its Focus Sash breaks, and it dies, now it actually outspeeds and then KOs the Tapu Koko with the Venoshock, because Venoshock gets double damage against poison targets, and when you have Muk using poison on everything, and then you also have Salazzle just going for the Venoshock damage, it creates a devastating amount of damage against opponents that are now slow and doing almost no damage in return. But Salazzle isn't like the major sweeper here, that pretty much you just go for the late game and eventually chip your opponent down into nothing, because when you look at these ideas, that when you look at Venom Drench, it's meant to eat away at your opponent slowly and not be like, oh, I snowball and then I automatically win. That's weakening your opponent instead of buffing yourself, so it's not like this crazy, insane sweeping, but it just makes it to where you have that long game down, and that's one of the cool things about this team for sure. And then Salazzle can also protect and then distract quite a bit. But now we get into Muk, because Muk has Power of Alchemy, so when Salazzle goes down because it's so frail after doing whatever, Muk should still be alive. Power of Alchemy now makes it to where Muk has Corrosion and then Poison Gas. So Corrosion Muk is not a new strategy, that was kind of one of the ideas of, oh, hey, if we get Muk using poison type moves as a dark poison Pokemon on anything, that's going to be pretty powerful. But giving it Corrosion with Poison Gas, now it's also devastating, because Steel types, Poison types, they get poisoned. I really like it because it offsets the Celesteela. That Leech Seed heals approximately 1/8, and then Poison deals 1/8, so I think that's actually really good for making it to where Pokemon that are trying to stall and sustain, they're losing out in that game, even if they are Steel and Poison type Pokemon. Knockoff makes them lose an item as well, so Muk isn't there to, like, gain stats, you know, use Minimize, maybe Curse, go for some insane damage and sweep. It's just kind of making sure the opponent has -2 on offenses, maybe even more than that, no item to rely on, and then gets beaten up by the other Pokemon on the team, and then it has Rest. Which brings us to Pyukumuku. So Pyukumuku has Purify, and then Purify plus Rest is one of the most insane things ever. So cures target status, heals user for half of its maximum hit points if that happens. So that means Muk goes to sleep and then wakes up that same turn while Pyukumuku heals itself as well. So that means you're getting 1.5 heals for your team for free, and it's absolutely insane that there's really nothing that you're giving up for that. And against opponents that have been Venom Drenched, they're not doing enough damage to where you're like locked into that for a bit. You go to full health, and now they're only doing a third or a quarter of your health again. So boom, you're pretty set right there. Venom Drench also on the Pyukumuku, so Pyukumuku comes in. Everyone's poisoned anyway, so you just keep lowering them. Double Venom Drench turns, guys. That pretty much all I have to do is Venom Drench on Muk, Venom Drench on Pyukumuku. Now your opponent has no stats whatsoever. Eventually Muk will start outspeeding them, which is really scary to think about. And then Pyukumuku goes for Poisonium Z on the Purify, which makes it gain all of its stats by 1. So now we have a +1 defense and special defense Pyukumuku using Venom Drench with that Purify. Now, I don't think we saw the last move of the Pyukumuku from the battles, but I guess that if you just had Toxic, that works out pretty well. You use Protect, that way you can just absorb some moves or something like that. And then you just try to make sure everything is poisoned already. Now, Toxic versus Poison Gas. I saw a couple of people in the comments kind of debating about this, which one is better. Poison Gas does the job just fine, especially in doubles. Like in singles, it's nice to have that Toxic because there's a lot of switching, there's a lot of stalling, so eventually you'll just get it to the point where Toxic eventually starts mauling your opponent's entire team. But the Poison, it's more consistent on that regular Poison, and also it does more damage initially, which is pretty big. Then we have Salazzle contributing damage, we have Muk contributing damage, then we also have Venusaur and Gengar contributing damage. By the time they've already taken, 3/8 of their health from regular Poison, that's actually doing more damage than the Toxic Poison. We're just going to be doing more damage on that Poison initially, and then Toxic starts to take it over. But by then, we have two Pokemon beating down on the opponent, and they're most likely dead, or they're just not wanting to deal with that amount of damage. So, yeah, it does work out pretty well compared to the Toxic, but if Pyukumuku does carry the Toxic, then that means that there's a Pokemon that just needs to get that little bit of status, and if it's the opponent's last Pokemon, then they're just going to eventually die. But then we have Baton Pass on the Pyukumuku, so now we're giving +1 in everything to Gengar, and what we saw was the Mega Gengar. Now, my guess is that's also the Mega Venusaur, that you run these three pretty much all the time non-stop, and then the last Pokemon option is going to be maybe a Mega or something like that. So we can run Mega Venusaur and Mega Gengar on the same team. Now, +1 in everything Mega Gengar is one of the most terrifying Pokemon I could think of, because when you think about it, Venom Drench is also applying, and then Gengar also has its boost to defenses as well as the offenses, so Mega Gengar turns into a tank with +1 on the special attack. That is absolutely terrifying when we're looking at the amount of damage and the stats. It also has Venoshock because everything is poisoned. Now, I'm guessing it has Hex as well because, hey, if they're poisoned, then you're also doing double stab damage on the Hex as well, which works just like Venoshock. And then we saw Thunderbolt, so I guess Thunderbolt for the Celesteela, for the Gyarados, for those other Pokemon, just to make sure you do insane amounts of damage to them. And since Gengar doesn't have the Corrosion, then that's how you want to hit Steel-type Pokemon as well, outside the Hex, if they're not already poisoned or something like that. Now, I don't think we saw the last move, but it could be Protect, could be a Destiny Bond, or it could be anything silly like that. Now, Gengar could be hilarious with that Destiny Bond. Say it's like a 2v1 scenario or something. You just have Muk on the field because Muk never dies throughout this entire ordeal. Or maybe a Pyukumuku that's just kind of hanging in there for whatever reason. So after that, Gengar goes for the Destiny Bond trade, and then Muk and Pyukumuku are alive, so you just kind of win by default because of that setup. And with the Shadow Tag, the opponent is not able to switch out with that Gengar, so they just get beaten down by Venoshocks and Venom Drenches and damage, and they're just kind of locked in as a +1 Gengar goes and completely trashes them. Now, for the Venusaur, we didn't see the Venusaur at all, but I'm guessing Venoshock, Giga Drain, Synthesis, other kind of coverage move, something like that, just kind of play along with it. Maybe it also has Toxic just to keep that poison train going. But Venoshock damage on the Venusaur would be pretty terrifying. My guess is like a modest nature, so max out hit points, go for the modest, when it's also just not taking damage. Like Thick Fat on the Mega Venusaur reduces the amount of weaknesses as well. So again, kind of showing maybe Psychic would be an annoyance to this team. Maybe Tapu Lele would be like the biggest threat overall, but with Salazzle, with these Venom Drenches, with these Venoshocks, you can actually do enough damage to get the Tapu Lele out of there pretty quickly if the opponent is not ready for what this team is going to do. So I feel like there's just enough to kind of work around whatever threats this team may face, because it does have some pretty balanced weaknesses overall. Then you just have Giga Drain, damage, and then Venusaur just kind of bulks out and wins. And then I don't know about the last Pokemon team, but this is where like the freeform aspect comes in. This is where you can find new Pokemon, new strategies, adapt this, change this to your playstyle, maybe come up with a different idea. That's my favorite part about Fan Fridays, is that one person cannot come up with all of the strategies that have been featured on Fan Fridays. That my channel started off as, hey, I've got a couple dozen cool strategies that people might want to hear about on YouTube, and then my channel just kind of blew up from there. But with the help of fans, we have hundreds, thousands of different strategies that have been featured across this channel, and it makes it just that much better for growth and discovery, that through all these collective minds, through the tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of you that have contributed to Pokemon strategy, we get all kind of crazy things like this. So that's why we just elevate it, take everything to the next level, and try to discover these new strats that have been dormant in Pokemon for years. Because, I mean, Venoshock has been around since the 5th generation. A lot of these strats have been around for a while. Poison Gas got the buff in, like, 4th or 5th generation as well. So these moves have been very usable for quite some time, and now they're being used their full potential, which I think is pretty awesome. And whenever we get a new generation, you know, it gets exponential at the amount of strategies. That instead of just having 600 Pokemon, now we have 800 Pokemon interacting with new moves, abilities, and doing all kinds of things like that. So it gets more complex, which means these crazy strategies will take more time to be discovered. So that's why I kind of thought Toxapex would be pretty cool. We have Merciless Toxapex. Critical hits always if the opponent is poisoned, and they're going to be poisoned. Now with this we have Venoshock, Baneful Bunker. At first I thought Scald, but the whole team revolves around poison, so I don't really know what the last move would want to be on the Toxapex. But yeah, Toxapex, you just give it Baneful Bunker. That way if there isn't a poison Pokemon, you Baneful Bunker, now they're poisoned. And then Venoshock gets 130 power and then always crits on the Toxapex. Toxapex still very tanky, has access to the Recover, has access to the protection from Baneful Bunker. And then, I don't know, you could do some other things. Poison Jab, probably not really that big when you have the Venoshock already. Maybe Light Screen Reflect, maybe the Ice Beam. Who even knows what is left for this? Maybe throw up a substitute. I don't know. There's just like so many opportunities where this can keep expanding and where people can just kind of test and come up with new ideas. That's also why I have all the Venoshock Pokemon right here as well. That because of it being a TM since the 5th generation, a lot of Pokemon have access to the Venoshock, so you can just kind of throw any of these guys on the team within reason, and then kind of use that to take your strategy to the next level. Also, don't forget about Acid Spray. It lowers their special defense by 2 stages. That can be absolutely devastating. Maybe Naligo on this team would work out pretty well. Has a really solid amount of speed, also has a good amount of special attack, and it is a special defense tank. So if you could kind of play around that, maybe bring a Reflect, keep that Naligo safe, while you're Venom Drenching, that could be scary, so maybe tech that in with a Pyukumuku. Bring Reflect on the Pyukumuku to cover for the Naligo while you're also Venom Drenching, and then Naligo's just using Acid Spray and then 2-shotting everything after that, with the poison damage adding up. So any of those Pokemon you could just kind of add in. That it doesn't have to be a poison type for this team coverage, which actually works out pretty well, that you can just kind of make it to where you have less weaknesses. Like, look at Electros. It actually gets the Acid Spray, so you can use this as a tanky Pokemon that does a solid amount of damage with no weaknesses, just kind of contributing to the team in its own way. Also, Poison Gas for the combo. Not as many Poison Gas Pokemon. Weezing does kind of have its own usage with like the Pain Split, Poison Gas, Swallow, Snunky. So I feel like it's kind of capped out there that Alolan Muk and Salazzle are the best Poison Gas Pokemon for the team, but maybe you'll just like come up with some kind of crazy strats that could work out as well. And then we have Venom Drench, also usable by quite a few Pokemon. I mean, Naligo also gets access to the Venom Drench. We also have a few other Pokemon that can learn it through breeding. Nidoran. So Nidoking and Nidoqueen are very powerful Pokemon. They can Venom Drench, they can do all kinds of coverage with that sheer force, and then be very scary Pokemon. So the strategy can be expanded upon, and I did want to look into some damage calculation with the Toxapex, and the Toxapex actually has some pretty scary damage as well. So what I had to do is that Venom Drench doesn't exist on the calculator, so I just turned Sludge Bomb into a 130 base power move, and then Merciless with the crit against a poison type Pokemon doing all kinds of scary damage with the Toxapex. I mean, 252 Modest with 252 in the hit points doesn't really give up too much tankiness on the Toxapex, and then we're almost one-shotting most Pokemon, but then after the poison damage ticks through, we're finding a lot of one-shots and two-shots, so that's still a lot of damage. And maybe that's why you could also just run some kind of other move for coverage. That Scald, it gets Stab plus a crit. So if they're already poisoned, then I guess you don't have to worry about burning them, and then you can just kind of get the extra damage right there. Maybe even throw down a Surf. That Surf will have the split damage, but you're critting, you're doing damage with opponents, you're getting that stab in there, and while it doesn't have that secondary effect, it's still just extra damage with that Merciless, so kind of turning Toxapex into a bit more of a scary Pokemon than people might expect. And you could also just throw in something like the Poison Plate, or the Toxic Plate, my bad, that you're getting 20% damage on the Venoshock that's already getting crazy boosted damage and stuff like that. Maybe this Toxapex could have the Citrus Berry for the reliability. Maybe go for a Confusion Berry as well to make it really tanky. Because the reason why you could like run 252 on Toxapex is that you're getting more effective gain. Then we go from 172 to 204. That's not really too much of a change, what, like 16% or something? But the special attack, we're getting a 50% increase, and then that's where our nature could go. We could go like, you know, defensive nature, 252 into the special attack, 252 in the hit points, and our Toxapex is still very tanky, and also remember, Venom Drench comes into play, and if you're baton passing with Pyukumuku, then it gets +1 defenses anyway, and imagine that, a sweeping Toxapex. that has +1 special attack, max special attack, insane defenses because of the boost. Venom Drench makes it to where it doesn't have to worry about damage, so it can still tank an Earthquake, it can still tank a Psychic type hit, and then one shot on the Venoshock. So Toxapec's still a very viable candidate as well. Pretty much anything with the Venoshock, stab or not stab, and then just converts damage. You have sweeping options in the Mega Gengar, you have tank bulk damage in the Venusaur, still run the Nile Ego, still run whatever you want. So the team can be expanded upon, but again, it's also not just about this team. Look for some other combos that exist in Pokemon, exploit them, and then maybe you'll be on the next Fan Fridays. So there we go, guys. Hope you all enjoy the video. One of the most insane Pokemon strategies I've been very happy to do a guide on today, and it's just one of those things. So thank you very much, Keys, for bringing this to Fan Fridays, and thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Hope you all have a nice day as well. Peace out.